Hello, it's July, baking hot, wilting, and so are my flowers. But I've been picking an awful lot of flowers. It's been gorgeous. Dahlias are in full flower, antirrhinums, cosmos, alstroemeria, loads. It's just gorgeous. And I thought it might be worth learning a little bit about foliage, because we focus on flowers when we're picking a bouquet, which is a lovely thing to do when we think about colour. I've got some pretty riotous ones here that don't go together at all. I don't mind. But what you really need to bring it alive is some foliage. Now, foliage strictly should be leaves, but in the sense that we use it in bunches of flowers, it's just anything that's kind of green or frothy, something that gives a backdrop to your flowers. So you can see this is, this looks fine, little jug of flowers, but I'm going to start putting some foliage in. And I'll go through a few things that I've found work really, really well. You'll probably be familiar with most of them. This one here, this is Alcamina Mollus, and this is the flower of the plant. It's a perennial, and it will very conveniently grow in the shade. Actually, it prefers it. So that's a nice little bit of zingy green to pop in there. Next, I'm putting a bit of my Privet Hedge in, and again, it's a lovely green. You can get variegated ones, you can get them that are more yellowy, whatever floats your boat, but I love my Privet Hedge. I'm always a little bit sad when we cut the hedges. In it goes. Now this one, looking a bit brown now, because it's over really, but this is Brisa Maxima, or greater quaking grass, and you can just see how the heads dance around as soon as there's a tiny bit of breeze. It's a wonderful plant. The only proviso is that it's got a really thin stem, so it's quite fiddly. It's quite easy to snap the stem when you're dealing with it. But it self-seeds everywhere, but it does pull up really easily. I'm just going to trim it. I'm going to stick that in there for a little bit of air. Here, you might recognise this. This is a bit of Verbena bonariensis that has not yet flowered, and this makes a nice little bit of foliage. Verbena is a perennial plant, really tall, waving purple flowers that butterflies love. Next on my list, this is a Marjoram. This is another perennial, happy in full sun, happy in dry soil as well, so quite useful. And it has got tiny, tiny white flowers, and you can wait till they're out, or you can cut it as it is. I tend to strip off just the lower leaves, so they don't go all manky in the water. That was my waste disposal unit, i.e. throwing it behind me. I'm going to stick that in there. This is my favourite. It's an annual grass. Well, it's set off next to us dog. Oh dear, I'll wait a minute. There, dog's gone quiet now. Now this is my favourite. It's called Panicum. Panicum Sparkling Fountain, and it is just so fantastic. This is it at the quite early stages, and then as it grows it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's more and more space in between. I don't know what you would call them, the little frondy things, but they're not fronds. Anyway, in it goes. This is an annual plant, so that means you have to sow it again every year. But I have found that if you forget, it self-sows. Self-sows beautifully. I've got more self-sown plants than I have of those that I bought, which is funny because the seeds are really expensive. Now this one is a mint, which again is ever so slightly in flower. I find that a lot of plants, if you cut them when they are only in leaf, they flop a little. Whereas when they're starting to flower, you can get away with them in water a lot more. And mint's in that category. People always, oh, there's a caterpillar there. People always comment on the mint in my bouquets, because you get a bouquet, you instinctively lift it to your nose, and this just gives off these wonderful aromas. Over here, wilting in the sun a little bit. This is Molluca laevis, or bells of Ireland. It's an annual plant, really good, gets about so high if it's got plenty of food and water, and that's a nice green to stick in your flowers. Everybody seems to like that one. This one's Eucalyptus. There are lots of different eucalypts out there. I actually don't know what variety ours is, it just came in our garden, but it makes for a really very good foliage plant. if you're going for a sort of bluey slaty colour, I find that it doesn't work with everything, but it works well with pinks and purples and blues and whites, but not so good with the kind of orangey red type things. This one's clary sage, so this is an annual, and it grows, it's got this little purple, I think they're called bracts on the top. They're actually not the true flowers. The flowers are these tiny little ones here, and you can get it with pink tops and white tops, and this works as a lovely little filling in your bouquet. And along those lines is another annual, which is statice or sea lavender. It's got really weird stems, hasn't it? Almost looks like a cactus, but it stands for ages, and comes in all sorts of colours. Some of them are a bit lurid, but this one is a good one, the white one. I find it goes with everything. I'm going to just pop that in. Now, this one I'm sure you recognise is cosmos, but I grow half of my cosmos just for the foliage because it cuts at all stages of its growth and has this lovely feathery greenness, nice deep rich green, especially if your soil's well looked after. So I often cut that just for its foliage. You kind of feel like you're robbing yourself a bit because obviously you're taking future flowers, but it's worth it. This one here is the foliage and buds of Tajitis, French marigolds. Now these rocket up, they grow really, really quickly. I grow them amongst my veg, partly for the bees, partly as a sort of companion plant thing, but it's a very handy foliage plant if you're needing a bit of green. So in it goes. Now here, sadly, it has wilted in the full sunshine, but you have to take my words that in my bouquets it doesn't. This is lemon verbena, which, oh, it's amazing. Honestly, it's just the smell is extraordinary. And I grow it for tea and infusions and that sort of thing, but a sprig of it in a bunch of flowers for somebody is unreal. Just beautiful. And if you're lucky, sometimes it'll flower these little tiny white flowers. We're nearly there now. I've got a second variety of mint here with woolly leaves and a slightly bluish tinge. So in it goes. Here I've just got a dahlia where all I've picked is the bud, and again this stands really nicely in water, so I'm going to pop that in. My last two, this one here is quite yellowy. This is Lonicera, it's a shrub, and it's just, I don't know, you know, it's nothing special, it's not going to set the world alight, but it gives a bit of structure, especially if you're a bit low on greens. And my last one here is parsley that's gone to seed. So these are actually little flower heads. They've flowered and set seed, so these are the little seed heads here. You can pick it when it's actually in flower, they're yellow, or you can wait till they've gone over and they're green. And there, suddenly, our sparse bunch looks so much better, doesn't it? Really, really nice. There's so much more out there you can use as foliage, you know, be imaginative. Don't be afraid to take things in bud. I use alliums before they're ripe. At the moment, well, they're flowering now, and I can't really bear to pick them because the bees are all over them. But there's an allium, beautiful allium spherocephalon, and it's lovely tall drumsticks, and they are green and they grow in colour from the base, and they're not too big, so they don't dominate a small arrangement too much. They're beautiful. I take a gastache when it's at the seed head or at the bud stage, and it's beautiful. And then there's a few that I might avoid that you can use, but you need to sort of go in with your eyes open. And amongst those would be all the Euphorbias. Now they're so pretty, so zingy, so bright, but they exude this horrible caustic sap, and it really is foul. It can bring your hands up in irritation. I got a bit of it on my lips once and it burned for days. Horrible stuff. So I pulled that all up off my allotment, even though it looks beautiful. And then there's a few that you would think that they would cut really well, and they don't, and they flop, and it's such a disappointment. And into that I would put the elderbush. You know, you look at beautiful elderflowers and think, oh, that would be lovely in my flat, in my arrangements. And no, they're not having a bit of it. As soon as you cut them, off they go. Anyway, I hope that has helped a little bit, and enjoy cutting your flowers.